sim. Talk or Giele, Giole, you, Kunju Demba, Gudele, led a new mobile in that lay you go share. Les so lay go share the le so done, lay the Susukansa Susu so great, so great, such a lay so on kind of so great, such that Gansa, that on the kissing tissue, that can lay Gansa Susu so great, that. 통람마저 받는 람 냠렌치이나 아니 저기 담명고스도 그 파바남기 내리 편지기에서 사고 말레스 당아지 솔람바다 졸람바레에서 봐 요레스 람 냠렌치이나 다 람귤람 균에 마게와이나 뭐저 저게 심제 담절이야 자상이 예사바 요레스 고가기 없이 레서 봐 요레스 해지 다 도시네 슈버하다.
Good evening. So we're continuing to look at the true origins, the second of the Four Noble Truths, true origins being the origin of our samsaric existence. And these are namely karma and afflictions. So we've been looking at, most recently, at who, as in which beings, accumulate virtuous and non-virtuous karma. So we saw in the final bit that we looked at last time that Arya beings do not newly accumulate propelling karma. So those who accumulate propelling karma are those who are not Arya beings. So those on the ordinary paths, the paths of accumulation and preparation, as well as those who have yet to attain a path, the most ordinary of beings.
나는 내 간데 소다데 내 소술디 딕슈도 하다든 마제 대양은 딘디 이상 고숨베기 소주기 미개와 두제나 수남마인 빌레솔라스 안 되감지게와 진도나 수름송어서 제나 수남일레소 수다 수메기 세디비기 신예소 겁나 미유벨레소 소고스.
Immediately starting where we finished last week, at the bottom of page 173, the very last sentence. And I've just inserted a few words in the Tibetan that were mixed in the first sentence over the page. So reading from how karma is accumulated at the bottom of page 173. If, with that body, you create non-virtuous actions by means of the three doors, for instance, killing, you will accumulate non-meritorious karma. If you create virtuous actions of the desire realm, such as giving gifts and guarding ethics, you will accumulate meritorious karma. If you cultivate the shamatha or karma abiding and the like included in the form realm dhyanas or concentrations, and the levels of the formless realm, you will accumulate immovable karma.
Sönam mayin bile sedi cikta ane cike sönam yili dini miyuveli sedili miya ming dostine sonra cizada ya giveli da mi giveli sedi da dini ki ming naso sonra yuvaje da den da sönam mayin bile sene na sonra gewa penjili dela sönam mayin bile je ane sönam yili sedi denryo hada mi da ande debigi 사람이 개와 편지기 레데라 아니 개벨레스 다 수도 수메기야 개와 편지기 레데려야 아니 메유벨레 사지 레도스치는 숨샤그로다 감숨기 레 민다다데 민데네 숨지.
This ties to what we looked at last week. The bottom of the point above, in terms of different types of karma. So karma can be presented as meritorious and non-meritorious and immovable. So in a threefold division. And as we saw then last time, meritorious karma is virtuous karma, so another way to describe it. And non-meritorious karma is non-virtuous karma, so again, another way to describe it. And then the third, immovable karma. So the karma that propels rebirth in the desire realm whether into the lower realms or the higher realms, is going to be either meritorious or non-meritorious karma, or virtuous and non-virtuous karma. And the karma that propels rebirth into the form and formless realm is that of immovable karma.
Gosum bes sojugi migewa duchena sededa gosum sinde lunga yusumi seoda lunga yusumi kone da bene luyugune sojubele ane nga yukone anjuenda ane jige roada dene yikone naksimnesim losoba denege gosum si lunga yusumi so leso yodu migewe leji soba ne migewe le duje sededa penjigele gewachima 마서 편집을 해서 봐야지 대라는 제자다 룽아 유수이 미개와 지제 레소백을 레 편집을 해서 봐야나 네가 그래서다 가수는 기업 편집을 해 자르고와 이제 순남만 빌리소고래 해시 솔라세 디소고
Where we concluded last week was the sentence starting, if with that body you create, so if with that body, this then is referring to those beings, whomever they are, accumulate propelling karma. If with that body you create non-virtuous actions by means of the three doors being our body, speech and mind. So if we were to accumulate non-virtuous actions by means of the body, that would be, for example, killing. By way of our speech would be, for example, lying. And by way of mental karma, would be, as for example, harmful intent, covetousness, and so forth. So reading further, for instance, killing. You will accumulate non-meritorious karma. So non-meritorious karma accumulated, non-meritorious karma, should it propel a rebirth, it will be a rebirth in the desire realm, in particular, into the lower realms. And it continues, if you create virtuous actions, and then the missing words, of the desire realm, such as giving gifts is just a less common translation of generosity. So such as generosity and guarding ethics, you will accumulate meritorious karma. The final sentence here, if you cultivate the shamatha and the like, so if you cultivate the shamatha and the like included in the form realm dhyānas and the levels of, so I usually use the English there, concentrations, and the levels of the formless realm, you accumulate immovable karma. So with a mind of karma binding, there the propelling karma that one accumulates is immovable karma and leads to rebirth in either one of the concentrations or one of the levels of the form realm or into one of the levels of the formless realm. So that then concludes this second outline, how karma is thereby accumulated.
Adelia, Devi Kamye Gawa Jindon, Surum Song, so Jena, Sonamile, Sogri, Penjigile, Sonamile, Sogri, Essid, Devi Kamye, Sidda, and the Sukamye, and the Jaya, Gansagi, and Sukamye, say Dubita, Denigi, Surum Song Ada, and Denigi, Jimbaton, also by Denigi, Jena, Lesogena, D, that Devi had a Miki or Penjigile, Sogo Mare. Just not that Devi Kamye, like him, then do it. Devi Kamye Gawas. Just not something Suda Sumila Kitiga, then the Sula Kitiga Kazaki, and it's just Surum Soyalas of Yoruba, the new Surum Soyade, Surum Didana, so you do the lady Penjile, Yawachima, Devi Kamala, Hada Miki, Penjile, so Gorves, and that is so go Mares, the Surum ready in a that Dendriki Penjile, Chag Mares, because in a
Just to go back to this sentence at the top of page 174, if you create virtuous actions of the desire realm, such as generosity and guarding ethics. So here it's specifically stating, Lama Tsongkhapa specifically stating of the desire realm. So if one accumulates a virtue within the desire realm, should it ripen as a propelling karmic imprint, it will lead to rebirth in the happy migrations in the desire realm. Should, though, a formless realm god accumulate virtue, say of ethics, they do not accumulate let me say it clearly. Should a formless realm being accumulate virtue of, for example, ethics, this virtue accumulated is virtue, virtuous karma, but it does not become a propelling karmic imprint that can lead to rebirth in the desire realm. Because, and the difference here is, the realm within which the being is who accumulated the virtue. So a being in the form realm who accumulates the virtue of ethics and so forth, that virtue cannot lead to propelling a rebirth in the desire realm, because they are not in the desire realm. Whereas a desire realm being who accumulates virtue, that virtue, should it propel a rebirth, will propel a rebirth in the high realm, the happy migrations of the desire realm.
인비게 해봐요 말해서다. 근데 수감게 가사게 되게 수림 소유게 수림다. 안에 semju semba chioredi nani 원dio 고마토에 편지를 말해서. 그래서다 안에 디나시 전주 semba 파피기 파바다 년도에 파바다 되니 가사게 수림 소유 여러 바다 되니 수림 소유에 semju sem바디 안에 원dio 고마 기와 편지길래 원도 기와 편지길래 레베스는 말해서 수림이나 수림 소유게 semju sem바시나 아니 원도 가서 원도 고마 원도 기와 편지길래 내가 요마 인국 말해서 네 말. 아니 가르에서는 대비게 가사의 대비세 대비게다 수림디 아니 수림 소와이나 디semju sem바디 원도 고마 토지길래 차기리 해서 어떤다지서 대비게 와라고 얘기했는데 Geshe Thubten Rabten Papa Karine, Papa Ganzaki, Surim de Simju Semba Jorwa, D. Penjiki, Wendio Gobantoy, Penjiki Chag Mares. Toyo. Just a wonder, had a Miko. Wonder that Rana Miko Bantoy, Chag Mares.
So what this point answers is the question, does virtue accumulated by means of, for example, ethical restraint, does it necessarily lead to propelling a rebirth in the happier migrations? And the answer is not necessarily. So if it is such virtue is accumulated by desire realm being and it propels a rebirth, that will lead to a rebirth as a human or god in the desire realms. But if a form realm being accumulates that virtue, it will not propel rebirth into the desire realm. Likewise, Arya beings of any type, where the virtue that they accumulate, for example, of ethical restraint, for example, that too does not lead to rebirth in the happier migrations of the desire realm as a human or god.
Samdan Dangbu say to be Shinish Tobina, Samdan Dambi Shini Tobina, the negative thing is in the Sunday Simju Sembadida, Samdan Damboki or Penjik de Chagore. Dina Shenda Nibi say to give Shinish Tobina, the Shinigi Sunday Simju Sembadi, something you are Nibaki or Penjik, Dina Shin at that Mother Chagore, Mandang of the Turum de Hugo Mare, Turum. That is Shine that you come Gomalaki or Penjik Dilla, that Shine that Sunday Simju Sembachagore. 다양한 대화기 와는 원대기로 출입 무리라와 더 수수매기 규칙 출입 차가 뭐 편집을 시내다 손에 띵이 그 셈지선 맞하고 그래지. 미요에 내셔야 돼. 근데 삼된 수 삼된 남바 수리 수 가서 출입 순간 지어로 와다. 그러서 출입이 다 손에 셈지선 바지 편집을 해 차고 말해. 수금도기에 편집을 차고 말해. 되베기에 편집을 차고 말해. 편집을 차고 말해. 출입을 해야 돼. 편집을 차고 말해. 다 수도 수명에 기업 편집을 해야 되라. 신에다 손에 유에 셈지선 바스.
What leads to the what is a propelling karmic imprint that leads to rebirth in the form or formless realm is a karmic imprint of the type immovable karma. So therefore, a desire realm being who accumulates the virtue of, for example, ethical restraint, that karma can propel a rebirth, but only into the happy migrations in the desire realm. So as a human or god of the desire realm, it cannot lead to a rebirth in the form or formless realm. The only karmic imprints or type of karma that can lead, a type of propelling karma that can lead to rebirth in the form or formless realm is that attained from karma abiding, so shamatha. So if a practitioner has attained the karma abiding and developed it into the mind of the first concentration, so the karma abiding of the first concentration, that they will thereby accumulate immovable karma, which can propel rebirth into the first concentration, but only into the first concentration. It cannot propel a rebirth into any other concentration, the second, the third, the fourth, nor into the formless realm. Hence, it is immovable. It can only lead to the propulsion of a rebirth into that level of that particular realm. So again, if a practitioner has attained the karma abiding, which is the karma abiding of the first concentration, that propelling karma they accumulate can only propel one type of rebirth, and that is as a god of the first level of the form realm, not to any other level, and so forth with other levels of the form and formless realm.
신이 마섭나 나 삼된 수당 수메리 편지를 내사야 메르사 도야메 사야메 와다 신이 인심지 신의 톱고로와 나 신의 톱다 아니 되네 신의 톱제 시선에 기와치마 수당 수메리 기리베스네 내봐요 말이야지 그래서네 신의 톱에 수를 베네 신의 톱나야 감고마 기와 편지를 내사바레데 이나다 제르레다 뇨모바 이고 기고로와 레사바르데 감고면 유모기를 깨요 말해. 마게와자 감고만 깨트야 말해. 감고면 유모 깨와를 대비 유모도 원주와 방고래. 대비 유모 원주와 마바나 감고면 유모 리고 말해. 말해와자다 감고 말해. 대비 유모 원주와 마바도 아니 신의 톱나야. 감고만 깨와 편지 레사와레데 감 대비 유모 원주와 마바나 아니 감고만 깨투고 말이지. 깨투고 말해. 신의 줍 대변이 뭐 원주를 빵매나 나 아니 마마가 원주와 빵고라 원주와디 매바 마세나 네 감수를 수수 감고만 기르고 말했어 기르고 말했어.
So from this, some key points. To cultivate the propelling karma, to cultivate the propelling karmic imprints, to be born in the form or formless realms, it is indispensable that karma binding needs to be attained. Without the cultivation of karma binding, one does not accumulate immovable karma, and it is immovable karma alone that can propel rebirth into the form and formless realms. So that then leads to a question. If a desire realm being attains karma binding, will they necessarily then be reborn into the form or formless realm? And the answer is not necessarily. Because a desire realm being, if they attain karma binding but don't go on to suppress the afflictions of the desire realm, when death comes, the desire realm afflictions will lead to rebirth being taken once again in the desire realm. So therefore, to achieve rebirth in the form or formless realm, it's imperative that not only is karma binding attained, but the afflictions of the desire realm are suppressed.
나마 치포와는 인생주의 주의시하시래 당은 시해들마 다들 내려야 가르스네 생각도 치위게 치위샘 내 죄간에 누바 신의 바도 줍수 되네 아니 기시도 개발연소로스.
So now continuing in the text to the next outline. So this is how you die and are reborn. So this is a subpoint 3. Subpoint 2 was on the previous page, how karma is thereby accumulated. And the first of these 3 divisions was at the beginning of chapter 12 on page 167. So first afflictions were looked at, then karma, and now karma is concluded. And now we come to the process of rebirth or transmigration. So here we see this has 5 points. How you die and are reborn is 5 points. Conditions for death, the minds of death, from where the heat withdraws, how the intermediate state is reached after death, and then how you take rebirth in an incarnation. So the first of these 5 points is the conditions for death. Because for death to come, then various conditions are required. So what those are, the 3 will be presented. Then the second of the 5, the minds of death. So this refers to whether the mind is virtuous, whether the mind is non-virtuous, or the mind is unspecified. There it's often translated as neutral, but unspecified is good. So virtuous, non-virtuous, or unspecified. That's the second. And so the minds of death refer to just before one dies. So it's not after one's died, but just before.
Then Joy Gane Duba, she go she or the dinner on the Subu Joy Diba, the then on the machine in the Subu Joy or what, the Nene Subu Joy, Ma Guanma, Dramo charge to Sin Younger Way, then money I Gamba Dramo charge to Sin Joya, du Gores, Joy Ganekan is go to the Kanakuzu or said, the neighbor shall Joy Gane Duba.
Yes, so just to say that more precisely, so the second one, the minds of death, refers to the three, virtuous, non-virtuous, or unspecified. So it specifically refers to the mind at death, so that last mind at death. Then the third outline, sub-outline, will be from where the heat withdraws. So where the heat withdraws down to the heart is either going to be from the crown down to the heart or from the feet up to the heart. So as the heat withdraws, then the body becomes cold. So either it's going to go from the crown or from the feet towards the heart. The fourth is how the intermediate state is reached after death. So this is the process of moving from this human form by means of the intermediate state or the bardo into the next life. But this is from the human state into the intermediate state. The final sub-outline is how you take rebirth in an incarnation. So this rebirth is from the bardo, from the intermediate state, into one's new, usually form, into one's new body. So this follows a process of death in the intermediate state, and then rebirth into one's new life. Those are the five sub-outlines for how you die and are reborn. And now to look at the first, conditions for death. So there are three conditions for death. So specifying the three. To die from the exhaustion of one's lifespan is the first. Then 2 lines down, to die following the exhaustion of one's merit. And then the third, to die by failing to avoid dangers. So looking at the first. To die from the exhaustion of one's lifespan is to die when the time has come, when one's entire lifespan propelled by previous karma is exhausted. So to die from the exhaustion of one's lifespan is to die when the time has come, when one's entire lifespan is propelled by previous karma is exhausted. So in one's life previous to this, one accumulated the karma that determines the length of one's life. And when the strength of that karma, or the potential of that karma is exhausted, then death comes. Or as it says, one's time has come, when the time for one's death comes, and one's life ends, because the strength of that karmic imprint that has now been depleted, and therefore one's life ends. So this may be 60 years or 100 years, whatever it may be, but that is the maximum limit to which one's karma can allow one, or enable one to live.
내고 희에마다 하야마가 시주 그래서 그러다 지산 세세비 시어시리 그런 거 튕긴 톤에 강하면 주류래 나서 강한다 강하야 매나야 그런 게 세디 같이 버 뒤에 차선 소소하다 것이 주 그래서 세세네 시와세 디시오래.
Such a person would probably have excellent conditions. They may be in good health, their body seems fine, but when their lifespan is exhausted, death comes.
nengaji nenjiglo chimbola che tensubola nase kangame tene ane jige sayatongya thoya kangame barchi yubene tene pe jig ni je pa deujin pa zu zhoma tune de uchiro ma je de joro da tseseyo ma da de tsemba wa la de.
This perhaps could be like dying from old age. There's no discernible reason that a person has deceased. It's just their body has given up. And this would be they're having come from the exhaustion of their lifespan.
강아 돈에 시도하나 세세 바래 그 세요르데 그런 안 세되어 유만이야 다 유지 마다하지 자야도에 매진 근데 도시 태로야 자기로 안 되니까 시도 가르신디 수는 세서 가르스는 가르세 버신 그런 롱주 얘기 수는 사샤바데다 즉 제진다 수는 미지고 매반자 자야도야라고 말어 된 비시 담배라 되네 저도는 시야나 내 자는 시야라 소리 물어와.
And that's the first condition. And the second, to die following the exhaustion of one's merit is, for example, to die from a lack of basic requirements or necessities for life. So necessities for life, or one's basic requirements, these come from one's merit. And so if one has insufficient merit, one will not be able to, for example, have sufficient to eat, or not be able to keep oneself warm in a cold climate. And therefore, when one's merit is insufficient or exhausted, then death can follow.
지금 유에바이나 가르치는 거 세딜에 소리를 껴봐이나 아니 세르모디야사다 미네바다 데네기 약 아니지기 로바치고 내래 탈야다 되는 세바나 또 세르모 차야기 배낭아 좀 밀리나래 든로이나래 무슨 라소바 데네기 줄도 사니 시로지게는 되는 마수 된체 주당한 아주 다양한 저기데 디서 도시에 세례 소리를 껴봐이나 세르모 돼야기 아니 사람들 도시네 사고래지래 지자당 저 유지기다 수능세디네 다디로한테 짐바당하지 디로와 짐바당하기 뒤च्या마나디 네 베네시에 짐바당와 고에 짐바당와 데네기 짐바나서 당야라 소병으로 데네 다베나다 네 수능 개와 침마기다 데네기 수능이 유지기 뒤 차고로 Sui ne solo Gyobaina, solo Gyobigile, Java Jivana. She said, never she Nico the major nearly Gyobji Tele Gyobo here. Buchinal Judiba di Shichi to Durban, the solid Gyoba, Gangele, Coast Shiegi, in not even the solid Gyobaina, saw till the Gyobji was said the court Shie de la Tarja was searching with the Ragurva. And Digi and did Yochima, it's selling with the lady, this the new Ureshirona.
How then does one accumulate the karma that one will have a long lifespan? So this comes from helping accumulating karma by means of saving the lives of those who may otherwise die. So in our experience, maybe this is less likely with humans, but certainly for animals this is possible. For example, if one is mindful and notices an insect just in a puddle of water, we can very easily rescue it and allow it to continue to live out its life. So in that way, one accumulates merit to have a long life. And other means will be assisting those who are ill, whether humans or animals, being a support to those in need in this way. And then in terms of the causes for basic requirements or necessities, so this of course comes from generosity, so from material generosity. So we see here the causes to have basic requirements met. This comes through material generosity, and then to help beings have to accrue the causes to have a long life. This can come through the generosity of fearlessness.
And in a young Mabamba Chiwa, Chiviki, Genjin, and the Shira Jung, is a tip, Tserimbu, Tse Masoba, Tse Duage, Tse Vache, and then Sayatuya, Sunamia Maso, Sunamia Yovache, Yovena, young hours in the bed, Galekawura, Nena, that Dinigi, Ganga Chambu, Ganga Chambu Chechi, Shira Jungores, Tizadina, the Agasore, Denishung, the young Mabamba, she was bene. And the Tojago Yalamoda Dabji, she saw when the young hours, Yamang, Denigi, Jenny, she did good, Serum, says all Mavache, Sunam, Longe, Gitevo, Sunam, Yavache, Denigi, Gangatede, and the chick, she do when the son and did it. That dinner the correspondent Chiwi, Yen, say, Mizimba, Sawa Sok, good union, Sumba, Tabu, the Dakaji. Say, Mutubi, say, Chumis, Mambus, Mangjaje, and the Shidra Yongura on the Nation, and this a young hour, young hour. Then the says I am Mangjaje, Nana Galish, Shidra Yongura, and this one, the Nation, Semasoba in ere, Sunam Yubache, Semasoba in air, the nigger Gangatin Shia Yongura.
Then the third condition for death is to die by failing to avoid dangers. So here dangers we should understand as by being in a dangerous environment, and it certainly would include things like, we probably say in English, an accident. So for example, being involved in a car accident. So these are the kinds of dangers that if one fails to avoid them, it can lead to being a condition for death. Then an illustration is given, includes the 9 causes and conditions for death, such as, so overeating I suppose is okay, but it's the Tibetan's a bit more explicit, eating without limit. So it's really, it's overeating to quite an extreme, taught in the sutras.
And Donale Guru Changa Regeneration, Segi Chumi Simba Sawa, say Mongushuji, and Telekawa Sawa, Dinishiven, Di Genji Nan, Shia Jungri, then Mutuba Sawa, and say Mutuba Sawa, say Sosole, and she Mutuba Jet in a Safran Di Genji, and she Mutuba Sawa. Then Nama Mashuba Sawa, Nima Sajati, Mashuba Digan and Sawa, Dinishi, and then Mashu what to. Tora Sapa Jimber Mijeba, Sida, Jigsa di Mashuayan, Yasayan, Dine Ma, Ronald Badu, Senekala Haji, Dine Dikin, Nazpo Shito Gures. She, Dine Mimba Kawas, the Mimba Kawas, Miba Kawa, like Mendo Miba, Kalas and Dele Miba Kai, Sadatus Madis, Gan Shito Ngura, and Dishe. Men social meeting bas, men social meeting bas, Kala, men said intimate, that's a tiger men in Guayama, men said Kala. Kala di negi kashi kala soso ransan subol pingu ba kashi nyamdu saisha ba na subol ne yung yo re ne ji ni ji kala di jik ni nyamdu sa ba ne ka di ni ba che ba che di jian jian ne na ne shi zhe yu shi ge yung res men soso mi den ba se di si re da gomba gomba mi she ba da mi she ba si de 디로다가 저게 제모로 시변에 죽기게 신주 공부하면은 안에 출마션 dim시로 그래서 공부하세 되네게 자와 제모다 가리네 되네게 될이야 마공바지 안 되래 장도 매바지 된 마제베네 도시로 제베네 시에게 냥아 좀 그래서지 아직 뒤민바세로 뒤민바 조아서 제자다 뒤민바 조아서도 아직 롱수 첨보자다 치로라 롱수 첨보자네 chilo ma don ro ba deni kinji ne ane ya de xie nian ga yo ba deni sa le ane ya ji ge me sa wa jue ba de ya ji de so ye na di wa ji deni ge rikashe deni je me sa jue ba ne da ne na za ki kinji ne ane xi zhuo yong ri ye sa ji je san deni ge me ta wa su pe san ma sa du chen gu ru su wa de che da di le ma yo ro ba da nyu da dan ji da di su yo re se ji So
we see here, to die by failing to avoid dangers includes the 9 causes and conditions for death, such as overeating, taught in the sutras. So those 9, if you have the text, they're mentioned at the back, but to mention them now. So the first is overeating, which again is really eating without a limit. So it's quite eating a lot. Then that's the first. And the second is eating some. And this first one of, again, eating without limit, we should understand it also to include drinking. So if one drinks excessively, then this can also lead to one's death. So that's the first. And the second, eating something indigestible. So this, again, can be something that is either poisonous in general, or poisonous for use, or unhealthy, something unsuitable to you. Perhaps you have an allergy, something like that. So eating something that is indigestible. The third is, and then just to say again, I said at the end, that this isn't an exhaustive list, but this is the list from Sutra. So the third then is eating without having digested the previous meal. So one's really piling on excessive food into a full stomach already. So that's the third. The fourth is failing to expel undigested food that has accumulated in the stomach. So it's a lot of eating too much or eating the wrong things. Then the fifth is intestinal obstruction. So that's one meaning. Again, I then said, but it can be elsewhere than the intestine. So, for example, choking. Sixth, not relying on specific medicine for specific illnesses. So this, again, understand more broadly. So it can include taking otherwise harmful substances in the correct manner, or taking the correct substances but in the incorrect manner. Like the doctors, they'll say before a meal or after a meal, this kind of thing. And it can also be, I can't remember the term, but where you're taking medicine and the one medicine interacts with the other in a bad way, and that can lead to death. There's a word for that, but I'm forgetting it. Then that was 7, so number 8, accidental death. So that's similar to what we had before, but here it's more about time of day or time of night, maybe. So going out at night in a dangerous environment. So something like that. So this is accidental death specifically due to wrong time. And then I think I missed one. Yeah, I missed one. Anyway, the order's not important. Then another was failing to understand the distinction between being accustomed or unaccustomed to activities. So this would be doing something that you haven't trained in. So imitating someone who's got a skill to be able to do something which is otherwise dangerous, and one is a bit foolhardy and does this thing, and it leads to one's death. And then the last is certain types of sexual contacts can also lead to untimely death. So perhaps this also refers to sexually transmitted diseases that can perhaps lead to death. So these are the 9 causes and conditions for death taught in the sutras. But as Genda said, this isn't an exhaustive list. There are more than these 9. Oops.
칼라 두유바 칼라디게 내가 조금 말아 디수사나 두유겐 칼라디에서나 디기 긴지 시도야나 칼라이 촐라르교 무여요르 칼라 사베나 디기 긴지 시도다 안디 칼라 야고여바나 가실이야지 디사나 겐 내가 요다데 다마라 요르바다 미토 데네 나소이 디로다 안디나 이당도 디로다 지게 다데 칠월 바도디 사용 겹제 사용이 견제네 시야 용거래 안에 지 줄로 겹제 많이 말로 겹제 토 데네 겹제 시야 용거래 안에 지게 천시에 올바 마루다 데네게 천시에 올에 시야 용거래 그래서 자산디다 시에게 견디게 차고라 지에게 다 양아와 마방 봐서 데베 깔래하고 데네네 나서 데네게 견체네 베 깔래 지금 나서다 시도해야 돼 양아 마방 강에게 데네게 더 시야 돼 근데 쇠는 세요 말고 쇠는 묘래 세요를 때 되니게 강한 체도 시려요 뭐래 해야 돼.
So the second one, eating something indigestible. So again, this may refer to someone eating something poisonous, but that which is being eaten that is poisonous may be poisonous for that specific person. So for example, if they have an allergy towards something, others may well eat this and have no problem with the food. So therefore, again with most of these, to understand them in a broader sense. And then other forms of untimely death could come around to things such as natural calamities, such as earthquakes, floods, being struck by lightning, or various forms of violence that can lead to death, such as warfare and so forth. What it comes down to, this third point, to die by failing to avoid dangers, is that the condition for death is not that one's lifespan is exhausted. One still has an excessive or unused lifespan, and it's not that one's merit is exhausted. One still has merit for requisites, but one meets untimely death due to failing to avoid dangers.
tumo lamrim ba shibe kala chiwa metaba samdai de jinan chiwi gene mang sunbi gene nyung se de chiwi gen mang bo shu yo re se tang ge de disu chago ba chiwi gen jisan cheso ne chiwa ane sunam so ne chiwa yang awe gen ma ba ji chiwa se de yang awe gen de ya de ne ge mang bo shu yo ro ba drama de ne ge do yo ro ba jisan chiwi gen mang bo re se disu.
If you think back to the presentation last year on death and impermanence, so one of the sub-points in there was that there are so few causes that one can accumulate to sustain one's life, but there are an abundance of causes that can lead to one's death. And that is specifically referring to this third condition for death, by failing to avoid dangers. And saying failing here, it doesn't necessarily mean failing, but in that it's not like one's intentionally doing something dangerous, but rather one encounters an accident. So this third point is very broad. There are many instances within this that leads to one's untimely death.
치위 셈 세들이다 치위 셈가 다 치위 셈 시디 치로 시디 갑리야다 닝한저 삼로야 가르가르 코고를 리그를 세데 게외 삼는 코고를 미기외 삼는 거 롱마다 삼는 코고를 베세 니고를 쉬어들이 제사다 대소 개와 당사 당보니 치위 셈라스 숨가라 세비에 참조와도 숨 당보라 숨니스 개와 대소 개와 당 니바 차소 미개와 셈 되네 지소 담보다 나중에 시스템들 개왕원도 교회 지금 거래 미개왕원도 니바 용거래 해서 다 대소 개와서 되다 지게 라마티엔 대바자 상계티엔 대 건조체 대바지 알아서 받아 되네게다 개위 셈 정원도 교회 용거래서 니바 미개와 셈원도 교와서 다치 더나들이 시로게 갑라 치심 개위 치심지네 개와치 삼는 오늘 교제 시와 지와 용거래 미기외 삼는 오늘 교제 시와 용거래 롱만댕에 삼는 오늘 교제 시와 용거래 예제래 단 개위 삼는 오늘 교제 시와 가능성도 개와들라 대소 개와 오늘 교래서 대바스데다 라마다 상계나 생건절이야 대바기 알아서 봐 용거래 아니 네 자주셈 개와 용거래 아니 지금 되네 용거와 되네 개와기 진짜 시와 용거래서 다 미가와 깨와데 가서 차소이 미가와 세네 다 차고기야 용거래 아니 미 콘르기 알아서 받아 되네 용거래 해시라 말말 시로치 되시데 다 미시엘마 진짜 미 통고를 끼시 된 거때 여러 디시 디디갑시고래.
So that's the first of the 5 sub-points in how you die and are reborn. Then the second, the minds of death. So this is referring to the period leading up to one's death. It's not that final moment of death, the mind with which one dies, but rather that ending period of one's life where one is still engaging with what's around you. So when people are in this last segment of their life, they may end up then dying with a virtuous mind, a non-virtuous mind, or thirdly, a mind that is unspecified. So now to read a little bit, both virtuous minds, such as faith. So this here refers to having the mind of faith as one is approaching death, faith in the Lama, faith in 3 jewels, and so forth. Or non-virtuous minds, such as attachment, anger, and so forth, arise in the mind. So one can move into this final period of life with minds that are virtuous, non-virtuous, or unspecified.
수수기 봐 시설에 삼성들이 된당아 시설에 삼제되느냐 안라이 건설에 접수로 겸르게다 되네게 다 대바체야라 소바도 삼다이도 기회 삼다 다 중국으로 되는지 용구로 다 기회 삼로지 치심게 와서 제거를 그래서 라바라바를 치심들라 치선 라바 치위 셈세는 치심 참모서 나서 이와치야 용구래 다 차소시대 차소 미가게 시대 다 시르치도걸 오당아 시서서 시르치도 오당해 마시르서 다 등에 신나서는 소수기 변조에는 변조를 차와기야 야 소수기 지게 년유들이야 차와기야라서 받아 소수기 사다나 되는 것이 조고래 아데 차와기야라서 용도하다 마시 디술 빼다 디술 하사를 될래야 차네 예 차와기야 중으로 어디서 디시고다 아니야 콘르게 가지고 물어봐도 콘르게는 안돼 제시로지도 되니게 지게 소수가 나마로 미 마와서다 통일될이야 콘라이 물어봐
The key part of what to take from this section is to take this as advice that when one's death is approaching, when one recognizes that death is approaching, that it's important to turn one's mind towards faith and ensure that one's mind is not afflicted. Because here what we are talking about is still a coarse mind. There are subtler minds of death, but here it's being referred to the normal coarser minds of life. So when one recognizes death is approaching, turn your mind towards virtue. It can be virtue such as faith in one's Lama and the three jewels and so forth. And ensure your mind is not being triggered in an afflicted way so that afflictions arise. For example, attachment to one's wealth and possessions. Because this, at the time of one's death, one recognizes I have to leave it all behind. And some things of great sentimental value. Or if one is covetous and has accrued a lot, then this attachment to sentimental possessions or to one's wealth in general, this can be an obstacle at the time of death. Or attachment to friends and loved ones, a sadness at this impending parting. Also, of course, anger can arise, anger at those around you. So therefore, these kinds of afflictions one needs to guard one's mind against. Both virtuous, so I'll just read these two together. Both virtuous minds such as faith and non-virtuous minds such as attachment arise in the mind as long as coarse compositional factors operate, depending on one's own actions or on being made to recall them by others.
아야 젠다기 다 겨나다 시주스라다 다 겨나 젠다 삼당고만 야는 라마 전셔야 아는 상예 대바제다 대겸 겸저 삼다시 아선 되네시 랍제 미 전주주 그런 두시네 안디지도 누스테네 요야 용을 예지래 나 미고와 대라 용구로와 미고의 섬나대 요되다 어때 소수이나 오당에 잘라 된데 증이 규진을 하되 당 된티기 잡아게 용구래 아니 아직 현대기 파트엔 주시 어다 교회마 시도서라도 교회 신의 단 결혼에 잘라드는 제 가르쳐오래 만족 가르쳐오래서 니네 랍시도 마그 차요 잡아게 돼 용거래서 모두신의 용거래서 제자다 랑게 삼단의 용거래 미션기 전도 주시 전바 대 용거래서 두신 거래 제자 이 니가 용서
Order the English and Tibetan vary a little, so we start the third sentence. So how does one direct, or third line, how does one direct, how is it that one's mind ends up being virtuous or non-virtuous as one's death is approaching? So this is by two means. Either, depending either on one's own actions, so this is referring to under your own power, you direct your mind to virtue. So you recognize my end is very close, and you intentionally generate a virtuous mind, recall one's Lama, recall the three jewels, and so forth. Or being made to recall them by others. So others can direct your mind towards virtue, remind you of the three jewels, remind you of your Lama. So in either way, either that you yourself direct your mind in that direction, or one is assisted by those around you, one's mind can be directed towards virtue. But also, one's mind, under one's own power, or at the direction of others, the direction of others, can be sent in a non-virtuous way. A non-virtuous direction leading to the afflictions arising. So for example, recalling that this is one's final goodbye to one's loved ones, or to the wealth that one values so, or one's cherished possessions, that you're going to have to leave it all behind. And maybe, and this can lead to attachment or anger at knowing that there's squabbling over things. So there's afflictions too can arise, either through one's own power, turning one's own mind in that direction, or those around you, by what they're saying or doing, turning your mind in that direction.
Gewi some Dangaji Mena, Dedi Kablia, Koran Tengi, Madame Bene Delia, and the Gewi Jasotata, Namu Korongi, and Jige, Yamlanji, Disuti, some Dangores, Jangoshi, the Kitchimbori, and the Negablia did all that Jig, Semba George, meet and other Kishi to do, that she didn't want to Carchiores and Mantu Shasha, Rugimbe said, Dini, Muyala Soba, the Dini Kishiala, so you move. Then Chigi do Yunamada, Chigi pay that the negative Mangu Tishi or that Kishi to the Mantu Shasha, Rumantu Carchiores, and Tam Muyala Soba Murua, and Digi and the Pico di Chapaki Lungore, Chapaki or it's not all that. Zavara Chapaki Muro, or the Nishine, says that this she do Gablia, the Negi and Corandum Unit Devayosagi, Sanyeta, and the Lamigo Bar, Kubaru, Coramic, Della Sobata, and the Coronga Catinci, Beji to Boutique, Curan Catin Beji, said, Della Sobata, and the Curanda, and Chico, Comiatic, that Jashu Sem Gom, said, Nijio Gom, said, and Conjo Japsuti, Jamro Gomsha, said the Negi, Pashevena, and Coron to Dushine. Just a time, the Pentochim said, then this more. The Tigalia, and you Korongi, the Casaro, the Numbin, Chiquita, Shimala, Sovania, the Ashorva, or the Shidu of the Tam the Mictungo Maresore, the turn by no Chili charge him with Koran Chapaki, Charo, Denico, Mason Kid, who did Besides, the Tungo Marti Kitchen was the water today. She said that carry jingle race in it, Mishanda to see 10 your race at this. That you Rabas and many the same unit and never much about Amcho Mago, Michasa, Dibardo, Dibara de Roda. The name many Amcho Goyagini never chas on it, 10% Shena, Miki Shina Gumara, Pendos Gamara. Mik Matoya, Amcho Mago, Chas and Dini Dundili, Chida, she make it done a horror in the Toya Kaya Marwa, Dini Tragoya Kaya Marwa, just
Now in English, we'll just go a little bit up in the sentence.
The rapper Chupa said, the nigger, Manyam be near up soon, the nigger, Dibado, semi Dibado, then or
So yeah, it says we have arise in the mind as long as coarse compositional factors operate. So this is referring to the quality of consciousness that the dying person still has. They can hear, they can see, they can engage with what's around them. So this is the meaning of coarse compositional factors here. So they are still present, they are still conscious, they are still awake, and they can, to some degree, interact with those around them. But the main thing is their coarse consciousnesses are still working, which means if this person who's now dying has been a Dharma practitioner training their minds, they should be able to quite readily turn their mind under their own volition towards what they have been, the Dharma topics they've been training in. And certainly, if they are accompanied by a companion, a religious companion, then they would help encourage them or assist them in turning their mind to what they have been training in. So, for example, they may show the dying person their prayer book, because that will certainly stimulate memory of their meditations, or show them a Buddha image and so forth. Or they would talk to them about, or encourage them, turn your mind to refuge, generate love, generate compassion. So this would be so beneficial. And this can be done at this point because of there still being these cause compositional factors operating. So the person can hear and make sense of what is being said, and can be shown images and make sense of what is being shown to them, as well as still having some control over their own mind. And so this is ideally how we ourselves should leave this life, or how we should help others. Certainly what we should try and then avoid is turning their mind in a negative direction. So I don't know how death is managed here in your society, but certainly where I come from, in the villages, it's all too often that at the bedside, families may wail and say, "We will miss you, how are we going to do without you?" And especially if the person's the breadwinner, they may express who's going to look after us, how are we going to survive. And this then can lead to a number of afflictions arising in the person dying. Or there may be conflict or expression of, leave this to me, give me that, or some talk about possessions and wealth. This is really not at all helpful. In fact, it's harmful. And a further point to make is that it's better not to have animals, or pets around at the time of someone's passing, because of the strong bond that the dying person may well have with their pet. Attachment may well arise towards their beloved pet, and this attachment for the animal may well lead to leading to rebirth in the lower realms. So there it's better not to have pets in the vicinity. And rather, as I said before, especially if the person is a practitioner, to turn them back to their meditation topics and encourage them, help them recall their meditation topics.
나한테는 개와다 미개와 가야면 롱마땡이 치와 세다 롱마땡이 셈다 템버 치와니 게미기 셈니 랑기야 마젠라 신이장 템버 마제바오스. So
that first sentence there, we looked at dying with a virtuous mind and dying with a non-virtuous mind. On the next sentence, we look at to die with an unspecified mind. So unspecified, what it means is it's not specified in sutra. That's the actual literal from the Tibetan. Unspecified mind, or if you know neutral as in ethically neutral, not virtuous or non-virtuous. So to die with an unspecified mind implies that one did not recall virtuous or non-virtuous minds by oneself, nor was one reminded of them by others.
나 그런 거 길에 싫어지도 그런 게 개화야 미래 미가 삼다가야 마호하지 미션다기 어쩌는 계획 현재 개화 잼마주 미가 잼마주 배나 근데 삼다데 거기라 근데 로마대 지고래 스테네 도시니 치유했습니다 로마대 지고래
So as it says here, one may well die with an unspecified mind. So again, not specified in sutra or ethically neutral mind, because one either under one's own strength of mind hasn't turned one's mind to virtue, nor has an affliction arisen, nor have those around you encouraged you or guided you towards something virtuous, or if they have, you haven't followed that. Or those around you haven't led to an affliction arising. Then one's mind is unspecified.
난 예샤는 이거 다 상인은 치유에 가서 다시 이루어지되 삼는 낭화로 가라가라 용거리 해야지나. 근데 내 치유했으면 연마박에 직 참자고 연마박 가르치기 참자고 해서 디스코시야래. 근데 내는 주어에는 나나지기도.
So then we can conclude here for tonight, and we'll start then with the next sentence tomorrow. So there, the first thing is we'll look at what appearances appear to the dying person. So we'll start there tomorrow. But if you have questions now, then feel free to ask.
It's wondering when contemplate death, it seems like obviously it's a very big deal, and it seems very difficult to have a virtuous mind of death. It seems very easy for afflictions to arise. But it seems also that for a Dharma practitioner or something, there will be a combination of things going on. that is often emphasised, the throwing karma or propelling karma.
It's often emphasized.
The propelling karma
Yeah.
is like the final one that determines the rebirth. And one that seems that might be more simplified is it's sort of a bit more complex than just that last final thought or impression, where it's an afflictive mind or a virtue, or is it a combination of different things that influence that kind of.
So what I usually hear is that what determines the next rebirth is that last mind that ripens at the end of life, at the last moment of life. That if it's virtuous, it'll propel a good rebirth. If it's non-virtuous, it'll propel a rebirth to the low realms. But here we're talking about sending the mind in a direction a bit before that. So is what I normally understand, is that correct, or is it there's a bit more to it than that?
Yeah, and is it the case that? Yeah, is it more complex in terms of the combination of different sort of impressions going on in the mind?
제자 디르와체 람가 디는 주는 조사 딜리 람가 디가 조스티레 제단 기회심기 치심제 조사와나 개회리 편제리기 머니 시빌리 리니버도 원도 주고래 미기레기 안에 지금 제 원도 주고이나 데네단 미기레 편제리기 니버도 원도 주고래 겟 가원 주베나 파초데 세레라 디레 디르와 체고래.
So the propelling karmic imprint that propels our next rebirth, this is usually something accumulated earlier in the life at some point. Earlier in the life at some point it is accumulated. When it ripens, it propels our next rebirth. But before it ripens, we try and get our mind in a virtuous direction so as to aid the ripening of a virtuous propelling karmic imprint rather than a non-virtuous karmic imprint. And that's what's being discussed here. So to give an analogy, when one buys, before one travels, one buys one's ticket, one's airline ticket. So that is like one accrues the propelling karmic imprint. So it's been accumulated, you've now got your ticket, it's sitting on your phone, but you're only traveling in a few weeks or few months' time. Then we arrive at the airport and you've been directed, hopefully, to the right gate. So this is like going to the right gate, is like generating the virtuous mind, so that the journey goes well. And then when one gets onto one's plane and it's now ready to embark, then it's like the propelling karmic imprint has ripened. So it's a sequential process. So the propelling karmic imprint is accumulated previously. But one has many propelling karmic imprints. So as to help bring about the ripening of a virtuous one turns one's mind in a virtuous direction as death nears.
다 가르리기라네 다 코니 가와리기레스는 미기위기 펜질리기 시바도 오늘 규그르베 인게비 펜질리 시바 오늘 규그레라나 나네 가리규르스는 가리규그레라네 데 데려야 아니 지게 랍타지 양치샤다이레 다상이 나오디.
Because we have all accumulated many complete karmic imprints, which means we have many potential propelling karmic imprints on our continuum. So as to increase the likelihood that it is a virtuous propelling karmic imprint that ripens at the time of death, one goes through this process of having a virtuous mind, because that makes it much more likely a virtuous karmic imprint will ripen than if one, as death is approaching, if one's mind is afflicted, then it makes it much more likely a non-virtuous propelling karmic imprint will ripen. So there's more to say on that, because there are differing presentations, but we'll discuss it more tomorrow. Okay. Cameron?
Just looking at the question of the definition of merit. In the past, we've talked about the definition of merit being the generation of the potential to engage in virtuous action.
Okay.
And I was just wondering if we have a simple definition of merit here, because this doesn't seem to be what we're talking about here.
Where what that?
In the past,
merit and virtue, it's different words, but it's the same thing.
Merit. Yeah. The potential to engage in subsequent virtuous action. So generating minds that lead to virtuous actions. Merit.
Okay.
That's a definition I've heard in the past. I was wondering if there's a simple definition here, because that doesn't seem to cover what we're talking about here.
지당 수남 남대 개화를 수내 벌어 수남라 거래. 개화라. 개화 강이 받을 수남래. 다들 알아 주고 수남이래다 미유래다 안에지게 수남 많이 벌리해야지. 직 편지게 내 있고 기쇼마데 개화 지부 기시고 말아 봐. 그러봐. 지당 수남라네 개화라 거래. 개화다 수남 지바래.
So virtue and merit are the same. Virtue and merit are the same. So I'm not sure where you heard that before. I don't think it was from me as a translator, but we covered this at the end of last week, so it's like just above there. Meritorious karma is virtuous karma included in the level of the desire realm.
So, if we were to say, definitely that definition of heart.
既然的养就俺都错杀三九罗，错杀的养一起错的，说那么错杀养一万一起过来，既然说那么难的给我哪个？但听哪来一万这样说那么错的一起错了的，东方有个面的，帝国是说那么一起错了，现金巴的出那么大的所有个面的说那么错的是错了一万，真的说那么错的一起错是一万一起过来。 但等下就来一个写的，像偏见来一个写的，那说那么一来的，说那么一不来，给为可是没有来，现民族现代西过来，在这大陆的那里头。
Where there is where merit is used in a different way is where you talk about the two accumulations. So here the word virtue doesn't come up. The accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. The accumulation of wisdom is performed with the wisdom understanding emptiness, and the accumulation of merit is virtue that is devoid of the wisdom understanding emptiness. So in this context, we use the word merit alone in the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. But otherwise, merit and wisdom are the same. Merit and virtue are the same. And this particular context that we are looking at here is that of propelling karma. So we're having this threefold division of meritorious, non-meritorious, and then before immovable.
So is there a store of merit? Do we create a store of merit?
Okay, is it, yeah. So, So the store of merit, let's say, because you saw my hesitation in asking, because this is more of like a way of speaking in English. What it is literally in Tibetan is the accumulation of merit or the accumulation of virtue. So store or merit. It's a noun or a verb. And in the Tibetan, it's just going to be accumulation of merit or accumulation of virtue. So where does this abide? It abides on the mental consciousness. So that is where it is accumulated or stored. So when you talk about it,
when it's sitting in the consciousness,
yeah.
Is this a potential then to engage in virtuous action?
So when there's the karma is accumulated karma on the consciousness, does this have the potential to lead to further virtue? So the virtuous and non-virtuous imprints are stored on our continuum, and where you have virtue or non-virtue of a particular type, and you have a lot of it of that particular type, you will with relative ease accumulate that kind of virtue or non-virtue because of the stronger accumulation, or as we say in other contexts, the stronger familiarity. Because that is we're very familiar to a particular deed because of our having done it many times, and therefore of many of those imprints. And where we have only sparse particular types of virtuous or non-virtuous imprints, to once again engage in that virtuous or non-virtuous action is much more difficult, just because the familiarity is weaker. Or to express it in this way, we have less potency, less strength, less imprint on our continuum. So it's kind of saying the same thing in differing ways. Because if you have a lot of imprints of a particular type, you have a stronger familiarity from accumulating those many imprints. Therefore, it's much easier to do this similar action again.
Is merit then a cause of favourable outcomes?
So favourable outcomes.
So virtuous karma being a thing that leads to favourable, subsequent favourable outcomes. Merit then a store of something that leads to favourable outcomes.
So favourable outcomes, I'm going to need to say it as something like happiness as opposed to suffering. So which will then, I'm asking, does virtue lead to happiness? And I don't think that's what you want me to ask, because it's clear. But that is favourable outcomes.
I'm not absolutely clear.
Yeah, but that is it. So when I put it how it is then expressed in Tibetan, then it becomes, the answer becomes clear.
Part of the reason I ask this is sometimes people question the existence of merit at all. So having a clear description of what exactly it is that's happening is useful.
Okay, so now we know that it's the same as virtue. If that helps. And what is virtue is what leads to happiness, and non-virtue leads to suffering. That's also been said before. Okay. Then it Okay. Thank you, Staple. Tomorrow, more time for questions.